All right, guys. What we want to do right now is I do want you to take a moment and break your questions down. And just like in class, I'm going to read them aloud. I think that it seems to make this go a little faster, okay? So let me kind of sit here where I can see my team talk. Number one, describe the setting of the story. And is it a violent place? And how can you tell? Number two, how does the author show that TJ looks out for only himself? Number three, explain why Cassie and the others have to scramble up the bank. And number four, compare Cassie's school with Jeremy's school. All right, so those are the questions that you are going to be thinking of today. Now, one of the things that I wanted to kind of incorporate into this lesson, because I had so many kids who were having difficulty finding the evidence for their questions. So every day I'm going to try to tell you what your page numbers are from where your evidence should come from. So on your Team Talk Day 1, I want you to write evidence from pages 10 through 17. So that's where you're going to find your evidence for these Team Talk questions at. So we also want to kind of keep in mind what that end in mind is, which is I will be able to identify aspects of the characters through their thoughts, their words, and their actions. So far we have been introduced to the Logan kids, Cassie and Stacy, and Little Man, and the other brother, Clarence. His name went out of my head. And we were introduced to TJ. That's kind of where the kind of people that we're talking about as far as characters. So our questions could do with any of those characters that I've listed, okay? So it's not just going to be one particular one throughout this whole week's study. So keep that in mind. So when I look at my questions, if you look at number 2, it says, how does the author show that TJ looks out for only himself? That seems like a pretty good end in mind question for me, because we're going to identify an aspect of that character through his thoughts, words, and actions. So as I'm reading, I want you to keep TJ in mind. And what are we learning about TJ, okay? All right, so let's take up our book. Top of 10. Ah, boy, I said, don't start that mess again. I didn't like TJ very much, and his stalling around didn't help. Come on, TJ, said Stacy, out with it. Well, TJ murmured, then grew silent, as if considering whether or not he should talk. Well, we reached the first of 2 crossroads and turned north. Another mile, and we would approach the second crossroads and turn east again. Finally, TJ said, okay, see, them berries burning wasn't no accident. Some white men took a match to them. You mean just lit them up like a piece of wood? Stammered Christopher John, his eyes growing big with disbelief. But why? Asked Stacy. And TJ shrugged. Don't know why. Just know they done it, that's all. How you know? I questioned suspiciously. And he smiled smugly. 'Cause your mama come down on her way to school and talked to my mama about it. She did? Yeah. And you should have seen the way she looked when she came out of that house. How'd she look? Inquired Little Man. interested enough to glance up from the road for the first time. Well, TJ looked around grimly and whispered, "Like death." He waited a moment for his words to be appropriately shocking, but the effect was spoiled by Little Man, who asked slightly, "Well, what does death look like?" Well, TJ turned in annoyance. "Don't he know nothing?" "Well, what does it look like?" Little Man demanded to know. He didn't like TJ either. "Like my grandfather looked just before they buried him," TJ described all knowingly. "Oh," replied Little Man, losing interest and concentrating on the road again. "I tell you, Stacy, man," said TJ morosely, shaking his head, "sometimes I just don't know about that family of yours." Stacy pulled back, considering whether or not TJ's words were offensive. But TJ immediately erased the question by continuing amiably, "Don't get me wrong, Stacy. They some real swell kids, but that Cassie about got me whipped this morning." "Good," I said. "Now, how'd she do that?" Stacy laughed. "You wouldn't be laughing if it happened to you. Why, she up and told your mama about me going up to that Wallace store dancing room, and Miss Logan told mama." He eyed me disdainfully, and then he went on. "But don't worry, I got out of it, though. When mama asked me about it, I just said old Claude was always sneaking up there to get some of that free candy Mr. Caleb gives out sometimes, and I had to go and get him, 'cause I knowed good and well she didn't want us up there. And boy, did he get it," TJ laughed. "Mama about wore him out." Well, I stared at quiet Claude. "You let him do that?" I exclaimed. But Claude only smiled in that sickly way of his, and I knew that he had. Why, he was more afraid of TJ than of his mother. Well, again, Little Man glanced up, and I could see his dislike for TJ a-growing. A friendly Christopher John glared at TJ, and putting his short arm around Claude's shoulder, said, "Come on, Claude, let's go on ahead." Well, then he and Claude hurried up the road, away from TJ. Well, Stacy, who generally overlooked TJ's underhanded stunts, shook his head. That was dirty. "Well, what'd you expect me to do? I couldn't let her think I was going up there 'cause I liked to, could I? Why, she would have killed me." And good riddance, I thought, promising myself that if he ever pulled anything like that on me, I'd knock his block off. And we were nearing the second crossroads, where deep gullies lined both sides of the road, and the dense forest crept to the very edges of high, jagged, clay-walled banks. Suddenly Stacy turned. "Quick!" he cried, "off the road!" But without another word, all of us but Little Man scrambled up the steep right bank into the forest. "Get up here, man!" Stacy ordered. But Little Man only gazed at the ragged red bank, sparsely covered with scraggly brown briars, and kept on walking. "Come on, do like I say." "But I'll get my clothes dirty," protested Little Man. "You gonna get them a whole lot dirtier, or you stay down there. Now look." The Little Man turned around and watched saucer-eyed as a bus bore down on him, spewing clouds of red dust like a huge yellow dragon breathing fire. The Little Man headed toward the bank, but it was too steep. He ran frantically along the road, looking for a foothold, and, finding one, hopped into the bank, but not before the bus had sped past, enveloping him in a scarlet haze while laughing white faces pressed against the bus windows. Well, Little Man shook a threatening fist into the thick air and then looked dismally down at himself. "Well, old Little Man done got his son's clothes dirty," TJ laughed as we jumped down from the bank, and angry tears welled in Little Man's eyes. But he quickly brushed them away before TJ could see them. "Oh, shut up, TJ," Stacy snapped. "Yeah, shut up, TJ," I echoed. "Come on, man," Stacy said, "and next time do like I tell you." The Little Man hopped down from the bank. "How's come they did that, Stacy, huh?" he asked. dusting himself off. "How comes they didn't even stop for us?" "'Cause they like to see us run, and it ain't our bus," Stacy said, balling his fist and jamming them tightly into his pockets. "Well, where's our bus?" demanded Little Man. "We ain't got one." "Well, why not?" "Ask Mama," Stacy replied, as a tow-headed boy, barefooted and pale, came running down a forest path toward us. The boy quickly caught up and fell in stride with Stacy and TJ. "Hey, Stacy," he said shyly. "Hey, Jeremy," Stacy said. And there was an awkward silence. "Y'all just starting school today?" "Yeah," replied Stacy. "I wish ours was just starting," sighed Jeremy. "Ours been going on since the end of August." And Jeremy's eyes were a whitewashed blue, and they seemed to weep when he spoke. "Yeah?" said Stacy again. Now Jeremy kicked the dust briskly and looked toward the north. He was a strange boy. Ever since I had begun school, he had walked with us as far as the crossroads in the morning and met us there in the afternoon. He was often ridiculed by the other children at his school and had shown up more than once with wide red welts on his arms, which Lily and Jean, his older sister, had revealed with satisfaction were the results of his associating with us. Still, Jeremy continued to meet us. But when we reached the crossroads, 3 more children, a girl of 12 or 13 and 2 boys, all looking very much like Jeremy, rushed past. The girl was Lily and Jean. And Jeremy, "Come on," she said without a backward glance. And Jeremy, smiling sheepishly, waved a timid goodbye and slowly followed her. We stood in the crossing, gazing after them. Jeremy looked back once, but then Lily and Jean yelled shrilly at him, and he did not look back again. They were headed for the Jefferson Davis County School, a long white wooden building looming in the distance. Behind the building was a wide sports field, around which were scattered rows of tiered gray-looking benches. In front of it were 2 yellow buses, our own tormentor, and one that brought students from the other direction, and loitering students awaiting the cue of the morning bell. In the very center of the expansive front lawn, waving red, white, and blue, with the emblem of the Confederacy emblazoned on it in its upper yellow left-hand corner, was the Mississippi flag. Directly below it was the American flag. Well, as Jeremy and his sisters and brothers hurried toward those transposed flags, we turned eastward toward our own school. Well, the Great Faith Elementary and Secondary School, one of the largest black schools in the county, was a dismal end to an hour's journey, so they walked an hour to get there. Consisting of 4 weather-beaten wooden houses on stilts of brick, 320 students, 7 teachers, a principal, a caretaker, and the caretaker's cow, which kept the wide crabgrass lawn sufficiently clipped in spring and summer. The school was located near 3 plantations, the largest and closest by far being the Granger plantation. Most of the students were from families that sharecropped on Granger land, and the others mainly from Montier and the Harrison plantation families. Because the students were needed in the fields from early spring when the cotton was planted until after most of the cotton had been picked in the fall, the school adjusted its terms accordingly, beginning in October and dismissing in March. But even so, after today, a number of the older students would not be seen again for a month or 2, not until the last puff of cotton had been gleaned from the fields, and eventually most would drop out of school altogether. Because of this, the classes in the higher grades grew smaller with each passing year. Well, the class buildings, with their backs practically against the forest wall, formed a semicircle, facing a small 1-room church at the opposite end of the compound. It was to this church that many of the school students and their parents belonged. and as we arrived, the enormous iron bell in the church belfry was ringing vigorously, warning the milling students that only 5 minutes of freedom remained. Little Mand immediately pushed his way across the lawn to the well. Stacy and TJ, ignoring the rest of us now that they were on school grounds, wandered off to be with the other 7th grade boys, and Christopher, John, and Claude rushed to reunite with their classmates of last year. Left alone, I dragged slowly to the building and then held the first 4 grades and sat on the bottom steps, plopping my pencil and notebook into the dirt. And I propped my elbows one on my knees and rested my chin in the palms of my hand. Now, that is where all of the reading stops today. I want you to take a moment when I sort of say hang up, when I sign off here, and I want you to go ahead and jot down where your evidence is coming from so that you don't forget it. And then you can go in and fill in your questions. So our questions today, it was such a long reading. We're not going to do all 4 in our journal, okay? But what I do like is we know we're going to do question number 2. So we're going to do 2 on Google Classroom. I'm writing it down so I don't forget. And let's do 4. I would suggest putting these 2 in your notebooks just so that before we have the next test that you can study them, okay? And so that in case they do repeat, you'll have them. Now, in tomorrow's lesson, we will go over 1 and 3 as well, but 2 and 4 are going to be our primary focus. All right, so good luck, and I'll see you back in the morning. Bye, guys.